Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2025 release Final Destination Bloodlines, and I'm going to tell you off the bat, I was very pleasantly surprised with this. I like the Final Destination franchise. I'm not like the biggest fan of it, but I enjoy every single one of the movies. It's been a while since I've watched through the entire franchise before, but I did revisit the very first one just about a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more than that, but and it's fun. It's still a fun film, and as long as they keep the suspense and the tension and the interesting deaths coming, I will always be interested. And this one is no different, and it's even a bit better than that, in my opinion. So I'll talk about it, obviously in a no spoiler way. So let's get into it. This one is directed by Zach Lipovsky, who did Leprechaun Origins, Freaks, not the one from like I think like 30s, obviously. And Kim Possible movie, the Kim Possible movie, as well as Adam B. Stein, who worked on a bunch of episodes of Jimmy Kimmel Live as a writer, I believe, Freaks, and the Kim Possible movie. So they've worked together on a few things before. Written by Guy Busick, who did Watch Over Me, Stand Against Evil, Ready or Not, Castle Rock, the 2022 Scream 6, and Abigail, so been very prolific within the horror community for a while. Also, Laurie Evans Taylor, who wrote Wicked Wicked Games, Bed Rest, and Cellar Door. I'm not familiar with those. And Jon Watts, who wrote Clown, Spider-Man Homecoming, not Wolves, Wolves, and Skeleton Crew. Yes, the Star Wars show Skeleton Crew, which I heard good things about. And another thing I need to say, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but I want to throw it up top. This was Tony Todd's final performance. He reprises his role that's kind of been reoccurring throughout the Final Destination franchise. Although I don't think he's in every single one of the movies. I think he's in a bunch of them. And yes, so he is back, and this was his final performance. And I'll talk a little bit more about my feelings on that in a bit when I get to that point. But synopsis. There's not a whole lot I can say. If you've seen a Final Destination film, it starts with a giant disaster that someone like sees. They're kind of, they have a sixth sense. They can tell that something's going to happen, and they end up having kind of this vision of this terrible thing that's going to happen, and then somehow they end up getting themselves out of that situation and a bunch of other people, and then it's this thing where death feels like, oh no, these people have foiled my master plan. It was their time to die. Therefore, these people need to be taken out one by one because it's past their time. They should have already been shuffled off this mortal coil, basically. So that's every film. Now, this one messes with things a little bit, so there are some good surprises. There's some more depth to the film than a lot of the other ones. I really appreciate that about it, but that's all I'm going to give you for the synopsis. And the title really comes into play with some stuff, which I'm not going to go further into. Immediately, it feels very familiar because you can tell it's going to open with a typical open like a typical Final Destination film. So if you are a fan of the franchise, you're immediately going to settle in and be like, yes, I can already tell I'm going to like this. It's going to feel like a lot of the other films. I'm in. So it's going to sell people pretty early. If you're not into the franchise, not sure if you're going to love it or not. I think it's still a solid film, though. They do a good job of building tension and a sense of foreboding. A large part is the sound design that's mixed with how they shoot things. The cinematography is really good. I think it's directed quite well. It's especially established in the beginning when they have like the big thing that ends up going on to kind of touch everything off with the storyline. The sound design really sticks out. It sounds amazing. It puts you on edge, which is phenomenal. And also the way it's shot. It's shot in a very cool, slick, and interesting way. I also love that by virtue of how the Final Destination franchise is, it has you focusing on a lot of like small pieces of things. That's always very interesting to me in film, and how they do that and kind of like just give you a bunch of little parts of a larger whole, and then it all comes together at the end of the scene in a horrific way, obviously. But I also love the fact that there's a lot of misdirection that ends up happening in these films, And this film is no exception. There's a lot of misdirection. You're wondering, from where will these deaths come? Because it sets up so many scenarios of like, this could be the thing that does a person in, or this, or this, or this, or this. So it's the anticipation of which of these things is it going to be, and how do we get there. So love that about it. The score is pretty over the top. This is one of my big issues with the film. It's one of those situations that they scream at you with the score when they really don't need to. The composition is fine, a little bit too cliche and over the top, but not too bad. But the way they crank that thing to 11 with intense scenes, I hate it. Less is more with scores. I wish people would figure that out when it comes to filmmaking. I don't know. I just think this is a thing that's just going to keep happening. So I hate how overused the score is. Oh, and here's my cat, Willow. She has decided to show up. She's usually not the one. It's usually Josie, but I got to move my notes so she can get in my lap. She loves laps. Anyway, enjoy her tail. So when the initial disaster happens in the film, it is in grandiose fashion. So within some of the films in the franchise, it ends up being kind of like okay, that was a big, terrible thing, but they don't go as elaborate and huge as they do with this one. And it feels impressive. And it definitely sucks you in and be like, oh, wow, we're going big with this film. So big thumbs up on that. I love that that's how they do it. The deaths have some satisfyingly gruesome gore to them. If you are a person who is into gore in horror films. Oh, cat settled in, by the way. Yeah, it's I'm the type of person who, when I see what ends up happening to the people in these films, I want it to be as graphic as possible, and it's relatively graphic. Yeah, so they did a nice job, and you can tell it's a mix. There's some CGI used, but then there's also some practical effects, which, you know, the practical effects always look the best in my opinion, but the CGI didn't look bad, so good job there. As the concept for the core of the story starts to take shape, it feels pretty engaging. It's one of those things where a lot of Final Destination movies, it wasn't as much about the story because it's pretty predictable. It's more about just the scenarios that people find themselves in and how is death going to catch up with them, basically. But this has an actual kind of compelling story. It's not as predictable as you would think, which is a very nice change, kind of going back to not being like some of the other films in the franchise. Now is when I'm going to talk about Tony Todd's scene. It's one scene, okay? But for me, it made me emotional. And I really hope that it is a scene that legitimately gets through to people. This is a man who knew he was at the end. This is a man who knew, just like in the film, with a lot of people in the film, death was coming for him. And he spoke to the camera. And I did read an article in Rue Morgue magazine from the filmmakers before the film had come out, and said that they basically told him to talk to the camera and say whatever he wanted to, basically. It wasn't scripted. Rough idea of what they wanted out of him, but he did his own thing, and he does talk to the camera, and he does talk to everyone sitting there watching the film. And part of what really got me is kind of knowing that, and knowing that it was from his heart, but also what he said and how it hit me is I want people to take his advice, me included. I've been working on that in my life, but me included, and I just hope people get stuff out of that if they see that. But I'm already feeling emotional right now just talking about it. Rest in peace, Tony Todd. He was a great person by all accounts, not just a great actor. There's something that I thought was a plot hole, but then they ended up taking care of it. I love when films do that, where they kind of it's like a bait and switch with me, where they'll just be like, oh, there's this plot hole, and you're just getting kind of mad, well, not mad, but disappointed about there appearing to be a plot hole, and then a bit later they're just boom, close the loop, and you're just oh, you got me. I totally thought that this was overlooked and you messed up, but you got me. The logic is there. Thank you so much. So I love the fact that they did that. And the ending isn't awesome. I actually think it's a little too drawn out, but it's a pretty solid ending. This is a good film, and especially for being a Final Destination film where they didn't need to deliver as much as they delivered in the film for people to be satisfied with it. I like that. That's great. And I think I had read that at least one of the filmmakers was a big fan of the franchise, so he really wanted to do it justice, like the best he could. So that's great. So out of 5 stars, half stars, and play, I'm going to give it a very good 3.5-star rating. Doesn't quite make it to 4, but it's a good one. I quite enjoy it. It's a very fun film. And yeah, some actual story to it. But would love to hear your opinions on it. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. You can talk spoilers in the comments. That's totally fine. But this is where I'd ask you for some support. The free way to do it, which I think you should just do if you like any of my videos, including this one, subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell button so you know when I'm putting up videos, and just watch videos. That's helpful. But if you want to get a little bit more involved and you feel like you want to throw me a few dollars each month for what I'm doing here as a hobby, there's a link in the description. There are 3 different levels of membership. I think it starts at $1.99 and it goes up to $4.99, including videos that other people don't see at that level. But all levels get early access to all my videos except my Shudder movie review ones, because those are put up before the movie's actually available and they're embargo things, so I can't do that contractually. But anyway, thank you so much for taking your time to watch this. I do appreciate it. And until next time, keep it brutal.